Hello, and welcome to Compound Insights, a podcast by CFA Society New York. I'm your host, Rob Rowan. Today, we're talking with one of the authors of a great survey on the impact of AI on businesses. It is the PwC 2022 AI Business Survey, and our guest today is Anand Rao. He is a principal with PwC's U.S. advisory practice. He works on business technology and analytical issues in the financial services, healthcare, telecom, aerospace and defense sectors. Previously, he was chief research scientist at the Australian Artificial Intelligence Institute. Anand has co-edited 4 books on intelligent agents and has published over 50 papers in computer science and artificial intelligence in major journals, conferences, and workshops. Anand holds a master's in computer science from Birla Institute of Technology and Science in India and a PhD in computer science from University of Sydney. He also got an MBA from Melbourne Business School. So, Anand, thank you for being here with us today on this very, very important topic for our members.
Great to be here, Rob.
So, as I read this report and the data, some of it was exceptionally helpful. I think some of it will be exceptionally helpful to analysts and portfolio managers looking forward and always trying to forecast the right thing. So one of the things that I keyed right in on was how you all used the research to look at how substantial AI value is created and realized by the companies in the survey. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, very happy to. As we all know, AI has been around for a while, in fact, more than 60 plus years. Although I think over the past decade or so, I think it's become much more of the mainstream. Again, moving from the high-tech firms more into financial services and the broader economy as such. So when we did our survey, and by the way, we have been doing the survey for the past 4 years, and we can definitely see a trend here that is emerging in how companies are using AI and what value they are getting. And in this year's survey, we definitely see a number of companies getting value from AI through just increased productivity and automation. So this is what we call as the first wave of AI in terms of the broader application. Once you go past that automation, or while you're doing the automation, which obviously leads to your bottom line benefits or cost savings and productivity increases, people then start focusing on the improved decision making. And again, we see from our surveys that almost 44% of leaders are getting benefit by using AI in automation, very closely followed by 41% of them also seeing better decision making using AI. So the third aspect, which also hits the top line, if you like, is improved customer experience. So this comes in a variety of different formats. Everyone has heard about chatbots and how chatbots are being used, but it goes beyond that into customer service areas, as well as targeting and personalizing offers in various areas. So all of those are improving customer experience. So if I were to basically list down the key areas where people are getting value, enterprises are getting value out of AI, I would say it's automation, better decision making, better customer experience would be the 3 areas.
Okay. I wonder if you could unpack those a little bit, each of those. I think a lot of people on this podcast are familiar with the promise or the practicality of where AI has brought financial services already. I think most of us are quite aware of how DeFi could basically reconfigure a significant portion of the back office of financial services companies because we're all in it. But I wonder if you could talk about the efficiencies gained in some of the other sectors that you follow that are less tech-oriented, like healthcare.
Yeah, no, definitely. So in healthcare, again, we see, just going through these 3, we see a lot of automation, opportunities for automation, as well as automation going on. Just to give an example, one of those automation pieces, which definitely is relevant in banking, but it also appears in healthcare and a number of other areas, is unstructured text. So typically, there is a lot of handwritten physician notes. We have lots of contracts, which sort of happens in almost every industry sector. Now, typically, the way businesses have tried to extract useful information from these have tended to be very human-centric, right? So very labor-intensive. And what's happening is now AI or natural language processing techniques can take literally 20, 30, 100-page documents, 200-page documents, and extract useful pieces of information. So for a healthcare company, if you like, if there's a health insurance and there's a policy, the natural language processing systems can go and extract what are the terms and conditions of those policies, who are the beneficiaries, what is the deductible, all of those kinds of details. So that's sort of number one. Number two, it gets to the harder side of it is looking at handwritten notes by clinicians and then trying to take that and make them into structured pieces of information. Again, we did a big effort with one of the pharma companies looking at drug interactions. So when we look at the drug interactions, so this is for their unit that is meant to file the regulatory returns on anyone who is complaining about an interaction with their drug. Now, what we were able to do is not just address the customer complaints, we were able to actually go and search through the entire medical research information published on PubMed and then extract all the clinical studies that have been done, all the interactions that people have reported. So all of that goes into the system, which the clinicians are now using to risk rate how the adverse effects is happening. So there's just one example in the healthcare where we are able to use AI, very much that natural language processing, machine learning, continuous machine learning as well in this particular case, because there are new research studies that come out literally every day, new drugs that are coming out literally every day, every week. And we are able to synthesize all of that and essentially have a tool that augments human decision making. And that's something that we are very careful at insisting as well. We're not trying to replace in all of these, replace the human ingenuity here. So we are essentially supplementing that with the AI. So as you can imagine, when someone in a front desk is trying to look for adverse drug reaction, they don't have the benefit of having read literally hundreds and thousands of papers, but that's what the system is doing, going and distilling that and then presenting only the valid information. So that's a way in which AI is being used, for example, in the healthcare industry.
Okay, interesting. I wonder if we could shift now to the comments you made about the management and the enhancement of the experience that customers of these companies have.
When we look at customer experience, there's an opportunity now, and a number of financial services organizations are essentially exploiting that opportunity to personalize the advice. So let me take a specific example here. Let's say someone needs to understand their retirement income. When I'm 40 years old and trying to see how much money do I need during retirement. Again, the life expectancy is increasing from whatever, 84, 85, 87, who knows how long I'll be alive. So in those cases, we essentially take a very personalized approach where we are able to create a digital twin of the specific consumer. And we can essentially project forward, not just with respect to the overall market, the asset classes, but with respect to their specific outlook, as well as their education, their children, their medical condition, all of those individual parameters. So someone, let's say, who's an investment banker or a trader at 40 might have a very different profile on their future earnings for the next 20 years. And also what they would need beyond that in terms of retirement versus someone on the factory floor. All of that data is available. And so what we do is we take those, personalize them, and we can run scenarios which are very specific for a certain individual or a certain family or household. So that's what we are doing in financial wellness as an example. So now here, it's everyone gets their own little digital twin, if you like, and then you can see how your digital twin would be in the future, what some people have referred to as your future self from a financial perspective. Again, we have taken the same idea and then looked at it from a health perspective. So I can look at my future self 20 years from now. again, if I continued my diet and sleep patterns and my exercise patterns, what will it look like? And then, of course, also, if I exercise better, if I had a better diet, what would I be able to do? And we can go into specific conditions as well. If I'm prone to diabetes or heart problems and so on, right? So what can I do to maybe push that boundary? All of those things can be done very much in that individualized form, right? So in the healthcare, we call it quantified self. And similarly, there is a future me in terms of a quantified financial view of myself into the future. So those are just examples, two examples of ways in which we can personalize using AI. And that AI is also continuously learning, right? So as I change my job, as the economy changes, all of that will essentially be self-correcting so that you know at any point in time what is the best guess as to what you would need for retirement, for example.
This is fascinating. Also, I've seen some experiments on using this type of AI future self modeling to improve choices that people are making today.
That's right.
The whole still growing area of economics that's getting into that and sort of a byproduct of behavioral finance. So it's really interesting. The other part of your survey that I thought was very important for the analysts and portfolio managers who are listening here was the little précis you had on the organization's plans to use AI simulations in the future.
That's right.
Could you give us a little bit of thumbnail on that, please?
Yeah. It's been quite interesting to watch this over the past couple of years, especially since the pandemic. We have been working on agent-based modeling and simulation, as we have been talking about for quite some time, right? So almost 30 years of my career I've spent in building simulations of how people think, how people make decisions. As you rightly said, behavioral finance or behavioral economics, or how do people make decisions, sometimes rationally, sometimes not so rationally, right? So predictably irrationally, as some would call it. So we have been studying that and doing that for a long time. And we have been doing a number of client projects as well, but it didn't really take off as much as it took off during the pandemic. So again, sort of rewinding the clock a couple of years. So in March, by I think March 10th or so is when the pandemic was announced. So what we were able to do by March 20th, we were actually able to release systems for our clients where we could essentially look at the COVID-19 propensity by your local population, almost at the zip code level, not only look at the zip code level, but also over time, right? So at the zip code level, and we were saying when and how those waves would hit. And if you go back March 2025, no one was really talking that much in the press about all the waves that came much later, and some of the data sources came later. But we were able to launch something literally in 15, 20 days of the announcement. The reason for that, and then of course, subsequently, we looked at what was the demand for hospital beds, so ICUs, ventilators, and so on at a local level, right? So it's one thing to predict at a national level. It's another thing to say, hey, in my hospital, how many beds do I need? How many ventilators do I need? If I don't have, where do I get it from, right? And then getting it from someone else's was also a challenge. So all of those things we were able to do. Now, what's interesting is we saw the entire market, both globally as well as in US, get very, very focused around the scenarios, right? So scenario modeling and simulation, as we are talking about, I think the reasons are very clear in hindsight. So number one, it was a highly uncertain environment, right? So no one was really sure what was happening. Even after March, April, when we started getting things, there was still a lot of uncertainty on whether there'll be a second wave and a third wave. When will we get the vaccine? How effective the vaccine will be? I mean, a whole host of issues, just going back 2 years, were all things that were uncertain. In an uncertain world, obviously, we didn't have any data. So most of the traditional analytics works with historical data. And even if you had data from 100 years back from 1918, it would still be very irrelevant in today's day and age. So there's no data. And the other thing that if people don't have data, you just go on gut feel, right? So people have worked on this for 20, 30 years. So I'll make the decisions. Whereas here, it was not that easy, right? So no one had come up with this scenario. And that's where we started seeing more adoption of the notion of simulation and looking at scenarios. So what I mean by that is everyone was looking at, hey, is it a V curve, U curve, W curve? What kind of a recovery are we going to have? And again, no one knew the answer, but it was better to be prepared. So we were doing scenarios for hospitals, for demand for groceries, demand for various cleaning products, demand for factory products, all of those things we were doing with respect to multiple scenarios. That's when I think I would say the adoption, the whole world, I would say, woke up to this notion of, hey, we should be able to simulate these things. We may not know exactly what will come, but let's be prepared by simulating 4, 5, half a dozen scenarios. In some cases, we literally simulate hundreds and thousands of scenarios. So we can come back to that. But that's when we really started seeing simulation being adopted. And again, it goes by various names. Some people call it digital twin. There's a specific thing attached to an asset as such. But even if you don't have a physical asset, you're just modeling humans and their decision making, people were much warmer to using these techniques. And since then, I think there's been a huge investment in startups and other companies focused around digital twin simulation and so on.
So in the 2 years and 1 quarter since you did that initial analysis, how much has the model learned from the waves that came since then? And how do you assess the impact on that, the model's accuracy or narrowing the scenarios?
Yes, and a very good question. So one of the key things that we were doing was over essentially the first year, right? So then I think there was a more definable pattern emerging in 2021, but throughout 2020, we were continuously changing the model. Again, when we had the first wave, again, no one knew what the second wave would be. If you took the 100-year history back, there were multiple waves in the previous one. And in fact, the second wave was much bigger than the first wave in the 1981. So we were able to use some proxies like that. Again, no one knew whether it'll be larger or smaller. A couple of points I would make in terms of the accuracy. Now, what we were doing was essentially taking the historical data, matching it with what we were observing, and then making the predictions into the future. Now, one of the key things that people complain about the accuracy of these models is they said, hey, people said there will be 1 million deaths, and we have only 200,000 at this point. Now, what people are forgetting when they do that is that there is a very close relationship between 3 different things. And I think we need to just understand that better. So what's happening here with whatever data we have, we were building the model, right? So when we started in March, 10th, there was literally no data other than what had happened in China and what was just happening in UK. There were some papers published by UK. So that was the only data that we had to go with the modeling. Now, so with the data, we build the model, and the model makes certain predictions. Now, what happens also is it's not a static world where the model just made the predictions and everyone is sitting quiet, right? So the model makes those predictions, and then the whole world reacts, right? People react, FDA reacts. I mean, everyone, right? So in the system, right up to the president of the country and president of every country are reacting to it. When they react and bring in interventions and people start curtailing their economic activity and so on, that basically changes the shape of the curve. In other words, the data now changes. Now you have to fit the model. So the way we see this sort of interrelationship is when we start getting more data, we will use the past historical data to project forward. And that then drives the human behavior. The human behavior, again, initial days, everyone went into a lockdown in US especially, and that obviously reduced the overall peak. And people started saying, oh, people said 1 million, it's just whatever, 80,000, 100,000. It's not a great deal. And then exactly opposite happened when everyone started going back into the economy. And then we got the second wave, much larger one. So I think what we have been doing in respect to accuracy is projecting the accuracy with the people behavior. Now, initially, it was just the dynamics around the virus. What I mean by that is, what is the infectivity rate of this particular virus? And then how many people are being exposed to it, and how are they being exposed, right? So initial days, we didn't even know that it was carried through air. It could have been anything.
Right.
All of those was initial. Yeah. But later on, we were able to model much more of the human behavior. Are people wearing masks? Where are they wearing masks? Are people socially distancing them? Are people traveling? All of those behaviors started being modeled. And that gave us a better accuracy, I would say, when you started factoring the behavior of the people.
Interesting. I wonder if something that occurred to me as a person who is somewhat experienced in statistics, I've been thinking about lately in our most recent time, when the number of infections has increased a lot.
Yep.
But so have the number of tests that are available.
Yep.
You can get tested on almost any corner in the neighborhood I'm sitting in right now. So how do you work that type of change in the behaviors into the model?
Yeah. No, the model is sort of quite complex. So the one of the things that we started seeing is more of the traditional epidemiological models, if you like, had basically 4 or 5 large parameters of susceptibility, infection, hospitalization, or recovery and death, right? So SIER model or SIERD model and so on. But what we started factoring in is symptomatic and asymptomatic cases. And then we started factoring hospitalization, started factoring vaccination, and then all of the different aspects of the disease itself. And as you're saying, everyone knew that viruses always change, right? So again, the common person gets surprised as to, oh, why did they mutate, right? So, but that's a constant way in which it happens. So every time you look at that and a new variant coming in, you have to fit the parameters of infectivity, severity, and so on, right? So, but once you've done a couple of iterations of those, you start getting into the mold of, okay, so let's try and get these numbers, plug them in, look at the behaviors, and the behaviors are also changing, right? So all of that is sort of almost streamlined, is what I would say. And there is a huge wealth of models that are now available. Having said that, there is still a challenge in a reference model. I was recently talking at a conference around COVID-19 models. There have been studies done where people have built, of course, there are so many models. There was only one model that was really tested and validated appropriately by peer review, which is a bit shocking given the number of models that we have built. So there's still a long way to go in terms of validation.
Yes. And I think you underscored there quite accurately the art and the science of fitting.
Yes.
It requires some judgment and some good data. Well, back to the survey for a second, because I do like to bottom line everything with ROI. I thought you wrote an interesting piece in here about the ability to assess and predict AI's ROI.
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
Yes. ROI is something I don't think people have paid so much attention to ROI for AI. I think somewhat understandable in the sense that people were just experimenting with it. But as it starts scaling and as you start having maybe larger programs, I think you need to really get into what do you mean by ROI for AI specifically, right? So there are some very significant differences. So of course, it's sort of simple formula, right? So return on investment. So the question is, what is the return? What is the investment? And like in any other area, there are soft and hard investments as well as returns, right? So I think quantifying those would be quite useful. Now that's at one level, right? So an example of a soft investment would be people just measure how they are building all these models, but it takes quite a lot of compute power to build some of these models. Literally, when we were building some of these models, one of the states, I think both Texas and California, given their size, it took 12 hours for us to run the model, right? So this is just one organization. And if you're repeating that, literally, we were doing it once every 2 to 3 days, or twice a week or thrice a week. You can imagine the compute power and the global impact and so on, right? So that's just one type of investment that has to be made and factored in. But similarly, there are soft returns as well. Now, the key thing that I want to highlight here is when someone says that there's a return, it's based around some accuracy of the model. So we say, if a human were to do this particular task versus a computer, we basically say this is 95% accurate. So now comes the tricky part. We all use these measures almost sort of colloquially, saying, oh, yeah, it's 95% accurate, 98% accurate, 99.99% accurate, and so on. Now, it's accurate with respect to what? It's accurate with respect to a human performance. Now, the first question you need to ask is, which human?
Right.
Is it all of your expert underwriters, right? So let's say insurance company, or is it just one expert underwriter, or it's not even an expert underwriter, someone who just joined, who was sort of available, and you just ask them to go and label some data sets, and then now you're comparing your AI performance with respect to that. So no one can answer that. Now, the additional challenges now. There's a great book which sort of talks about noise in human judgment, right? It's not just bias, but noise. Humans are not very good at making the same decision every time. And different humans for the same situation might also make different decisions. In other words, there's a wide variation on, quote unquote, what is the right answer. Now you're saying the AI is accurate with respect to which one of these answers, even within the same human, right? So that's a sort of the second level challenge. The third level challenge is, it'll be great to compare the AI performance with a human performance, but how many times have we actually logged the human decisions? And as a species, we are probably very arrogant in saying that, oh, I don't want to be questioned. I'm human, right? So of course I have to be right here. And how dare you start logging my decisions and start questioning me, right? So any good decision is my decision. Any wrong decision, the market sort of works against me, right? So that's the other bigger cultural challenge for us to say, oh, AI did better. And the last one I would leave you with is, when we say 95% accurate, the human looks at it, or the manager looks at it and say, oh, what about the other 5%? So why is the AI getting wrong? Fair question. We need to look at that. But what no one really asks is, hey, what about that other 95%? Are all of my humans getting it 95% of the time right?
Right.
Don't have that, then even though you might be getting 5% wrong, it might still be more value there if only 50% of your folks are getting the value out of that 95.
Okay, well, thank you. No, that's a good lesson about how we should be more humble in addition to the other things in here. So the survey is the PwC 2022 AI Business Survey. You can get it from our website. And Anand, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much for having me, Rob.